Hello there. Welcome to episode 35 of Bow and Blade, a podcast brought to you by medievalist.net, your home for all things medieval on the internet. Bow and Blade gives you a seat at the bar as scholars of medieval warfare go beyond the Wikipedia articles to talk about the debates and the questions that we're working on today. I'm Michael Livingston, Distinguished Professor at the Citadel, the Military College of South Carolina.
And I'm Kelly DeVries, Distinguished Visiting Professor at the Air Force Academy out in the Rocky Mountains. How you doing out there on the coast, East Coast?
It's nice. It's nice, but I miss you. You're getting seasonal weather,
I am getting
and
seasonal weather.
yeah, we're not.
We're getting it
It's
by day, though. It was 50, high yesterday, and it's 70 already today. You go, come
that's
on.
Colorado, man. I love it. I love
It
it.
is. It is. Well, it is. And hats off to the Air Force Academy. Wonderful place, just a
Yeah,
wonderful place. Love the students, faculty are great. It's a nourishing academy right now, a place of higher education. I can't say that about universities, and that are still struggling to get out of the pandemic, and so Air Force Academy is strong. Students are strong. These are the best and brightest. I'm glad to be among them.
that's awesome, man. That is awesome. And
It is.
yeah, it is simply. I mean, the academy is gorgeous. It's
It is gorgeous.
gorgeous. It's gorgeous campus in a gorgeous place in a gorgeous state. And I mean, it is everything. Really, really awesome place.
Yeah, I'm
So
very lucky. Got to see the folk over in Utah, getting up
yeah,
there, so that was nice too. Yeah,
yeah. Well, I'm just bitterly jealous because like that's my native land is
yeah,
Colorado. Like
yeah.
my folks are there, my brother's there, everybody. So yeah, glad you are
I
enjoying it.
I do go out every morning and yell to them, "Hi." I
Oh,
figure
good.
that everybody in Colorado lives very close, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We all know each other. We all know each other. They're like, oh, good. That's being coming from Mike. Cool stuff.
No, okay, yeah, it
Uh,
is. It's a beautiful place. Yeah.
it is. It is. It's that time again.
It's that time again.
Yeah.
First, a little announcement,
Uh oh.
just a little one. Uh,
Little one.
yeah, hats off to UNESCO. UNESCO just named 40 sites, 42 sites, World Heritage sites. There are at least five medieval sites. And I'm going to pat myself on the back here a little, Mike. Of course, I never do that. You know
No.
me,
No.
humble as can
Go for it.
be. Uh, I wrote the first desk report. Well, that's what it's called. Assessment of historical and archaeological worth for the five Harold the Bluetooth earthen fortifications in Denmark that were just named heritage, World Heritage Site, and duly and justifiably so. These are amazing fortresses. Trelleborg's the most well known, but there are five of them altogether, all built in the 10th century, and they are marvelous. Artifacts, Viking artifacts, big artifacts, but they are
Big
big,
ones.
big ones. They are big. But I'm
Huge thing.
really happy, really happy.
Yeah. Well, we are grateful to you, Kelly. There was I remember I've known about this for quite a long time because when this happened, I was like, guess what, man? UNESCO's. I'm like, what? Because it's such a cool thing to be honored like that and to be held in that kind of regard to make a comment for something like UNESCO on these sites. And yeah, you did your work well because
Yeah.
because they're in.
Well, at least
So
the
yeah,
initial work. I mean, I couldn't believe that they hadn't been named. It's one of those easy things when what? These weren't named? Okay. I can think I can do that. It is a little bit interesting when the first line is pretty much the first paragraph says, "Oh, by the way, we can't ask anybody in Denmark to assess these." I said, "Oh, good." So I'm the second. I'm like, they're bringing somebody up for the AAA. You know?
yeah, it was a good thing you did, and yeah, well deserved. Kudos to you, and a big cheer to UNESCO
Oh yeah,
for
yeah,
getting those done. UNESCO's yeah, pretty amazing organization in its own right.
yeah.
And the fact that they do this is yeah, it's awesome. It's
It is.
awesome.
And they haven't. I mean, they don't do it every year. It's every few years. But 42 sites and quite a number of medieval, some ancient sites. Get a list. They're out there on the website and everything. UNESCO. I think Peter, our producer, has put them out on medievalist.net, the medieval ones. So for places also to go now when we're off on our jaunts around the world
For research.
for research.
For
Totally
research, yeah.
research.
Yeah.
And food.
For
And drinking.
well, for sustenance during research.
During
I'm
research.
just
Oh,
if
I was just
anybody's
thinking the research on the food.
if anybody's listening, just it's research. Just
Especially the IRS. All
yeah, yeah,
research.
yeah. Well, it's true. It is true. It
It's
is true.
true. It is absolutely true.
It is just
Yeah.
it's also research we enjoy. So yeah. So yeah. I mean that's amazing news.
Amazing
In the
news,
world of medieval things. It's also a cool day because it's Q&A time.
Q&A
It
time.
is Q&A time, and we got some good questions.
Got some good questions.
We
So
got
what
some
you
good
drinking
questions.
though tonight? I mean, Q&A, we don't have to really keep it to a region.
Yeah, I mean we can do whatever we want, right? So I'm nailing a gin and
Bartender.
I'm having a gin and tonic.
Yeah, I'm in gin tonic.
It's still kind of summery here in Charleston, so a gin and tonic made properly, made the way I like it. It's a good day. It's a good day.
Yeah, that's a good day. There's no doubt. I think in honor of Harold Bluetooth's fortresses, I'm going to have something to wash down mead, which I really don't like, but I will have a glass of mead and then maybe something blue to follow it up in honor of Harold Bluetooth. Although we all honor Harold Bluetooth, he's the inspiration for Bluetooth on the computer.
So we got a little something blue.
A little something blue,
To what this down.
with a lot of alcohol.
I see. I see.
Yeah, just to keep with the Danish Viking spirit.
Yeah, you could join me in a gin and tonic. Get a little sapphire, blue
Oh, well, that's
sapphire
true.
there.
A little
If you
sapphire
want
gin. Maybe I'll do
to.
that. Yeah, I better knock back a mead first. So if you hear me choking,
Sorry.
I really am not a mead fan.
I've had a couple good meads,
Yeah.
and I've had a lot of really really bad ones.
Now,
Wow.
one thing I got to get you to do, because this is the first for me. I did try mare's milk, fermented mare's milk, the one based on the Mongols, and I'll tell you something. I start to understand why they're trying to invade and are angry all the time.
I no, thank you. No, thank you.
Okay, put it in the
I'll
research category.
honestly, no, probably. If somebody handed me some, I'd probably try it once just to know.
Yeah,
You
you
know,
gotta
you
try
can't.
it.
You got to find out. Yeah, so it's Q&A, and we have last time we did a Q&A was that weird, like it got cut off. We still don't really understand why it got cut off, and then
Still
I ended
don't.
up I ended up recording a bit in a hotel room at like 2 a.m. in France.
Yeah, that's right.
Be like, keeping it quiet because Kelly's like sleeping in the next room over, and like, sorry about that, everybody. So we're back. I think I have still all the questions that we kind of didn't get answered. So we got that stuff plus some new ones,
Some new ones, yeah.
which is great fun.
Great fun.
Should I just start? Should I just start?
Just
at the top?
start. Throw them out.
Okay. All right. David Casagrande asks. He says, grew up at the university with the story of the bankruptcy of the Bardi and Peruzzi families. In the Italian context, he says, it became a kind of cautionary tale, a sort of never trust foreign governments type of story. Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Probably. But he wonders if this was also a kind of severe culture shock. In the Italian peninsula, it was normal to lend to anyone, even if it was understood that there was no chance of getting back the loan directly, but that you would get instead some kind of privilege in return, such as rights to something or freedom from some other tax or something like that. And David's wondering if there was kind of a difference in understanding about how loans essentially function between the Italian side and the English side here, and that what they were kind of wanting in return was stuff Edward wasn't ready to give, or not understanding that they wanted. Um, and that's what we're seeing happen here. It's kind of a culture clash, if you will.
Yeah, yeah. It. I mean, I don't know whether it's a culture clash. It's funny. The first time I ever heard about the Bardi and Peruzzi, because it's not mentioned. You could read a book on the Hundred Years' War and not even have it mentioned, and yet it's extremely interesting. The Bardi and Peruzzi lend Edward III a huge amount of money to engage in this conquest in 1340, where he expects to do more than he did. I mean, Battle of Sluys we've talked about. Siege of Tournai we've talked about, one good, one bad. I learned about it in grad school, where my professor of history, Hundred Years' War history, would say, "Oh, yeah, it wasn't that important." And the professor in economic history go, "This was one of the most important things that ever happened in the 14th century." And I think that that's unfortunately the way that it's kind of handled. The English don't think of it very much, but the Italians do. This is the first time a government is lent money um, from the Italian bankers. The English government has lent money, and then the king willfully just says, shrugs it off and says, "But we're not paying back." And two banking houses. There's only about five in Florence this time. Medici's haven't come in yet. Two banking houses are basically thrown into bankruptcy. The Bardi will come back, but the Peruzzi almost disappear from history. And and from the Italian side, it's just how can they not do this? How can he not pay this back?
Yeah. Well, and it's definitely, from the records, it looks like they did want money back. They,
Yes, they did want money
they
back. There's
yeah.
no question.
So there wasn't it wasn't we're never going to see this money again, but maybe we'll get something else. They did expect money back, but I think also they did hope that, well, by financing this, we'll then be in a better position for making deals in the future.
Yeah,
As this continues forward. So it was an investment, but also we're gonna get money back on the front of our investment,
and that
and they
they're still
didn't.
thinking about it. That they're still thinking they're going to get it back in 1346. Niccolo
Yes.
Capone has a very interesting article in our case book on the Battle of Crecy, where he says this may be the reason why the Italians were so interested in the Battle of Crecy. There's 10 chronicles, very early chronicles that are accounting for what happened at the Battle of Crecy, and he posits the idea that they think that now that Edward has won as so as he did is so well in 1346, then maybe they'd get something back. You think Edward ever intended? I mean, we've got the Black Death next, so
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say because of the Black Death, right? And what that does. That sort of resets so many things. Just like COVID did in our world, right? Like
yeah,
you said, there are still schools that are trying to get back on their feet and stuff. It really reset a lot of things. I mean, if that hadn't happened, we don't know, but if that had, I think he probably would have tried to pay back, at least to some degree, because we see his desperation to get some kind of success to stave off the creditors earlier. So it would make sense in that regard. But yeah, it is. I think Nicolo's totally right, that this is why we have all these Italian sources interested in this. I mean, there's also interest because of Bohemia's there, right? And so there's that
yeah,
connection going on. I mean, that's obviously part of it too. But yeah, part of it is as well. Just like that's where the money went. So what's going on, right?
yeah.
And yeah, oh, there's a success. Oh well, is our investment finally going to come good? And no, it didn't. But yeah, the Black Death has a big part to do with that. So
Yeah.
so
I've
it's an
I've of-
interesting question.
I've often wondered too, and this is just something I thought about. I was reading about it the other day. The Jews have been kicked out of England in what 1290s, 1292, something like that. It's been fairly recently, in comparison to so Edward the First, grandfather Edward the Third, has kicked the Jews out, and they're the ones who were lending money to Richard Lionheart, to John. So, we're not, then Edward the First, John's grandson. So we're talking about a time when England is shifting its own idea on borrowing money and and borrowing money because they've got the wool and the wool trade is going well. So the Bardi and Peruzzi probably think this is a good way of opening up the banking into this new power, the power that's now threatening France, threatening to come back into kind of the world. So
Yeah.
they are taking a risk, but they do want the money back, I'm sure.
Yeah. And don't get a bit of it. And isn't
No,
that a bummer?
yeah, yeah, and it is interesting. Giovanni Villani, who's one of the great chroniclers for all of Europe at that point, Florentine, and he is involved. He's involved. He owes to the banking family too, or he's invested among them. So he loses money, and he becomes very interested in everything going on up in Flanders and England and with England. He's one of the best chroniclers for the Battle of Crazy. His son then carries on and is the
Yep.
only chronicler. So the comparison of 10 for 3046 for Crazy, one for Poitiers,
Yeah, and which a king is captured. I mean,
in which a king is captured. Yeah.
it is strikingly different. And and again, Crécy, you got Bohemia there. King of the Romans. You have a lot of that stuff, connective
Hmm.
tissue as well. But yeah, it is striking the difference. It really is. Every time yeah, we're like, are we sure there's no more Italian source? Nope, there's no more.
No, no, no. Nicola looks for him each time
It's
because he found
crazy.
such a wealth in Crazy with Poitiers. But again, so the Bardi and Peruzzi in 1346 are still wanting money back. In 1356, they appear to have given up on that. And at least for the Bardi, they are pretty much bankrupt at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, sorry, the Peruzzi are pretty much bankrupt at this point.
So
Good
yeah,
question.
it's a great question, David. I would say kind of regardless of anything else, economic history is not as widely practiced as it should be, and especially this kind of like informed
Yeah,
intersection of economics with military, with sort of political culture and things like that, just doesn't get as much traction as it should, and that's unfortunate.
yeah.
So
Means you're aging, though. By the way, if you think economic history hasn't, I've always thought when I was younger, oh no, it's all got to be ideology, nationalism, all this other stuff. And then I start getting older and thinking, wait a second, it actually has something to do with that gold and silver stuff that they keep
follow the money, man. Follow the
all
money.
the money.
Follow the money. Micah Tillotson. Hi, Micah.
Hi, Micah.
Micah Tillotson would like to know. I know it was common in antiquity for armies to recruit from certain areas due to the types of troops those regions could field. Excuse me. Could a medieval king expect to muster certain types of troops from certain regions? Could you go, I, the King of France, issue a call of arms from Champagne? I expect my subjects to muster this number of heavy cavalry from Bordeaux, this number of light cavalry, etc. Or was it more along the lines of, I'm making a call to arms, bring what you can, and we'll kind of deal with it with what we've got?
Yeah. Isn't that a great question?
It's a great
And
question.
and I'm the one thing is, so I can identify times when that happened. Okay, not like the Romans. That's where we base it on. The Romans that go to Crete and say how many slingers are there, knowing that the Cretans used slings to bring down birds for food.
Right.
They go to Rhodes for slingers as well. Go to the Spanish because they're horsemen, that sort of thing. The one area that I know that really factors into this, where a lot of recruitment is done for specific troops, is the Welsh marches for archers.
Yep.
Edward the First recruits a huge amount out of the Welsh marches because they're trained in archery. There's a lot of poaching still going on along there, I suppose. The forests, but there's just it seems the Chester area and the area
Yep.
of Pembroke have a lot of archers,
The
longbow.
Cheshire Bowman at Shrewsbury.
Yeah,
Yeah, that is absolutely an example of this. So the answer to the question is both,
Yeah,
because
yeah,
you do have instances where, we are specifically, you are required to bring specifically this kind of stuff, this kind of people, this kind of, you know, this many horses or whatever. We have that kind of, specific receipts, as it were, or not a receipt, like a checklist, right?
yeah, yeah.
But then we also have, it's a call to arms, get your stuff and come. And then when you get there, you're like, okay, what do you got?
Yeah, yeah.
So this is very much a, moment to moment kind of thing.
I think it is too, and part of it is because we have retinues that are required during certain periods of time, and that seems to be based on the wealth of the lord who's supposed to bring them. So, for example, 12th century, the Count of Flanders has the largest retinue of any of the counts in France. He's supposed to have 100 horse and 1,000 infantry. The, now there is a famous one where I think one of the King Roberts, or the only King Robert of France, calls a battle, and the Flemish count sends a single man to hold his banner, and the bastard son of a nobleman who wants to gain experience in fighting. So he doesn't quite make that retinue of everybody there. But that's what he's supposed to bring. And of course, that, by the way, everybody didn't show up, and Robert had to kind of declare war, not going to war.
Whoops.
But at that point, that seemed to be wealth. The County of Flanders was the most prosperous one. The Duchy of Normandy, the County of Gascony, these also supplied big numbers. Aquitaine supplied big numbers, whereas the Ile-de-France didn't, because it didn't have a large number of soldiers that could be drawn from the lands. Now, the one exception I think coming up throughout the Middle Ages is the militias. So let's take Flanders again, for example. The Battle of Bouvines knocks off the entire Flemish upper nobility.
Most of
They're
them, for
all,
sure. Yeah.
yeah. There's a tremendous study that was done by Warlop called the Nobles of Flanders, the Flandrin, and he shows how the families all kind of end. They're either defeated and killed, defeated and exiled, defeated and imprisoned, but they're not prominent after the defeat of Bouvines, 1214. So then that area starts relying more and more on the urban militias, which to the detriment of France in 1302.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, that's such a weird, thing that Philippe Augustus, it's a short term massive victory,
Yeah.
that kind of plants the seeds of a long term problem, by putting in kind of new money, rather than old money. The old money, he kind of had a finger on that pulse. The new money is all tied to England, and
Yes.
that's now the leadership. So, whoops.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Well, I mean, he does break the backbone of the rebels. Had consular rebellions from the Low Countries. He breaks the backbone in Bouvines, but at the cost of now giving much more power,
Yep.
just out of need to produce defenders for the area that earlier would have been done by the retinues of the Count that no longer exist. The Count no longer exists. He's sitting down in Paris. Ferrand of Portugal sitting down
Poor,
in
poor,
Paris.
poor guy. Poor Ferrand. He had it rough. Marries into the family. Good times on the way home. Kidnapped. Whoops. What a disaster of a story that is. That's
Yeah,
for another time, though. That's for another
another
time.
another time. I think though, let's put this out a plea. I'd like to know more about this, and there's obviously some of these areas that are going to produce specific troops that we're missing now. What troops are coming out of the Pyrenees on either the French side or either the various Spanish kingdom side? What about the Alps? Do they produce specific archers and projectile weapons and other things? It'd be very fascinating. I don't think anybody's done a lot in that.
Well, there's so many question marks we don't know, weird clues that we have that something's kind of going on. There's
Yeah.
a poem, for instance, that Kelly and I have worked on, A Curse on Arms Makers, that has these references to specific weapons coming from specific places,
Yeah.
and we don't know, is that simply because it works for the rhyme, or is it because at
Yeah.
that moment that place really was particularly well known for this kind of weapon manufacture, or weapon usage, perhaps. Like
Hmm.
we just we don't have enough data for that. But it looks like something is being referenced there
Yeah. Yeah.
that is tied to this kind of regional expertise in one way or another. But we just don't have enough to know for sure what it is.
Yeah. We'd love to know more. If you've got some specific examples out there, send us to us. What was it? And this is the poem also mentions daggers from Damascus, doesn't it? We've never had. It's
You know what?
always, you know.
I'm literally going to look it up right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I
Uh,
remember thinking that that was such a strange one because we'd always associated steel, Damascus steel, which you would think not daggers, but more into swords and so forth. Um,
yeah. So he says the daggers are from Bordeaux
Bordeaux.
and swords from Clermont, which is what we thought was weird. It's like what's
Yeah.
up with that? Because then later on he says maces from Damascus.
Masons from Damascus.
Yeah,
That's what it was. Yeah.
and like what is going on there? But like others of them we like make sense. He says pikes that the Flemings use,
Hmm.
and like, oh, okay, all right. Are we talking about Hudendaw here? Is this is this what he's kind of trying to get at or something like that? But yeah, it's is it evil daggers from Bordeaux and swords from Clermont because that works well, or was
Yeah.
there really something going on there? The
And it,
crossbow bolts and knives made from Milanese steel, he says. So yeah, he's got these connections, and if somebody knows, tell us.
yeah, we can't. I mean, they're not in the old standard arms and armor sources, and so we don't know that Bordeaux was specifically important for making daggers, buying daggers, and Clermont for swords at that point. But it'd be fun to find out if there is any local historians from those areas that are listening that may have a tradition or may
Yeah,
have a few documents. We'd love it. Let
it'd be
alone
awesome.
mesas. I don't think anything's coming from Damascus in the end of the 14th century.
Yeah, this
That's
is
the thing that's strange.
it's 1374 uh, that this is written. 1374. It's a poem by Eustache de Champs. We have the translation um, in our medieval warfare reader, uh, item 19.
Yeah,
If
yeah.
that means anything to anybody, but yeah. So we got the whole translation there. If you want to read it, we were gonna publish an article on it. We didn't, did we?
No, we gave a paper on it. We've still got to put that together. I think I'm
Okay.
behind on that. I think you've done your
Okay.
bits there.
Yeah. All
But
right. So
the
that's
weapons he mentions, of course, is about half dozen different um, uh, staff weapons he mentioned.
yeah. The staff weapons. We're like, I don't know. It's a
Yeah,
staff weapon.
it's a staff weapon. But they're different in his terms,
Yes.
and the staff weapon histories have been done have been on Italian and German sources, not on French.
Yeah.
And Victor Gay, who wrote this amazing 18th or 19th century, uh, what would you call it, dictionary, encyclopedia on
Yeah.
arms
An
and armor and
encyclopedia. Yeah. Yeah.
architecture and everything, he has them listed with this poem as the only source of it.
And
So it's
defines them as like staff weapon. And you're like,
a
thanks.
staff
I knew
weapon.
that.
Yeah, yeah. So
I
this,
knew
I
that,
mean,
man.
it is
Which,
fun.
yeah.
The whole poem is fun because it's one of two poems that Eustace de Champs writes that seems to indicate he doesn't like war. There's other he completely likes war if it's fought against the Flemings. If the French are fighting against the Flemings, he's
Yeah.
behind that, but he doesn't seem to like
Well,
war
or to get Calais back.
or to
He's
get
like,
Calais
damn it,
back.
we want Calais back. But yeah, I mean, Eustache de Champs, man, he's an interesting dude. Really interesting dude. So yeah, I think we got kind of off topic there, but good question. Good question.
Good question. Yeah.
Roll Stork asks, why was there mention of lighthouses in ancient classical times, as well as in the 18th century, but not in the Middle Ages. Says can't really seem to find anything. Hoping you can answer this riddle. They could be castles that help the ship dock safely in the harbors. Surely not everyone break down lighthouses, right? So, good question. Thank you, Roll.
Very good. Yeah.
We do have medieval lighthouses.
Yeah.
We do have them. The one that immediately comes to my mind is the one Edward the Black Prince has built in the middle of the mouth of the estuary of the Gironde. It's now been rebuilt, but it's beautiful. It's the lighthouse of Cordoue, and gorgeous. But yeah, he built the original there to help protect shipping in and out of the Gironde, which is kind of a major conduit for English money there in the south of France. So yeah, there were medieval lighthouses, both lighthouses that were continuing to be used from earlier times, like the what's it called, the Tower of Hercules.
Yes.
That had continued in continuous use. So like you have those, but you also have new ones being built, as I just said. That said, I understand totally where this question is coming from, because you look at something like Dover, for instance, and there the Roman lighthouse is turned into a church, right, in the Middle Ages.
Or the Tower of the Church.
The Tower of the Church. Yeah, that becomes the. It's really cool to go see. I mean, there's a number of cool things to see at Dover Castle.
Yeah, just one or two.
Just one or two.
Of history.
Yeah, but definitely go see that if you go to Dover. It's kind of easy to miss it because there's so many other incredible things at Dover. But it really is kind of fascinating that you have this Roman lighthouse that has then gone this conversion practice. So yeah, there is a sort of reuse of these things. And I think in some areas you can look and think, well, there should be a lighthouse here, but there isn't. But often what you see is instead we have a multi-use building, like a castle or a fortification protecting, the entrance of a harbor that could serve as double duty for what we kind of consider a lighthouse.
Which is what the Romans were doing anyway. They had lighthouses, obviously, protect incoming ships and so forth. But they used them as signal stations. There's no question. There was one on Scarborough, for example, that stood out on the bluff within the King John Castle, now the Castle of Scarborough, and it was reused well into the Middle Ages as a signal tower, but also, warning people that this is the cliff, and they're going to get, if they're sailing too close to it, they're going to get cliff. And we know that Charlemagne continued using them and continued building lighthouses for purposes of communication as well as warning. And there are definitely medieval ones all throughout the Mediterranean. Love to see a military use. Somebody, coming and out talking about military use of some of these, because I don't think there was a lot of navigation that was done at night. There's certainly not a lot of night attacks. So whenever we hear of battles like at Sluis or at one of the many Genoese and Venetian battles that take place, they always mark it kind of by a place that has a lighthouse, but the lighthouse is not actually doing anything as far as the battle is concerned. But it'd be very curious. It'd be very curious to see on sailing the first attack of Cairo, because we know he's using ships coming in on the city, and the Nile had lighthouses there, and the just outside of Cairo. It'd be very fascinating to see a military use sort of thing.
Yeah, I can't think of anybody who's done that.
No, I can't either. Not even specific ones. They are, and judging from the one in Dover that is so well preserved, the Roman one that's in so well preserved, these are fortified sites. There's no question. You can't. But we also don't hear of pirates going after him, or Vikings going after him, or anybody going after that specific building. So whether that means it's doing its job as a fortification or that it's just not a fortification, I don't know.
It's not target at any rate.
It's not targeted. Be
Yeah.
curious to see about specific buildings like that, though. Again, kind of extending it a little bit further. What do we do about specific buildings that have purposes that are not necessarily military but could be military?
And it would be curious to know, if looking through that, do we see a differentiation when we finally hit gunpowder weapons, that you could actually from shore do some terrific damage on a boat, on a ship. Does that change usage of these, kind of fortified or semi-fortified sites? Do we see a big leap there? And is that then because of that? Are we getting more sailing at night to be protected from that? And in that case, does that mean more lighthouses are showing up now because people are wanting to sail at night because it's safer in that regard? All right. I don't know. Somebody's got to run the math on it.
That's absolutely true. And in fact, if you're talking about gunpowder weapons, the construction by Mehmed II, of those two castles, reconstruction of the one castle on the Bosphorus, and then building the other one, Hisari, Rommel, and I can't Andulu on the opposite sides of that. Sorry, some sounds there. Those two castles, they're very surprised because he actually will launch fire cannonballs from there at ships coming down Bosphorus. And it appears to me that's one of the first time that shore batteries, what they will later be called shore batteries, are used in this way. And they're and even whether they're shot off the walls, I believe they're shot off just underneath the castle rather than from above from on the walls. But it's still an interesting thing that he is trying to fire at ships that are proceeding down the Bosphorus, and how rare that is. But there's a point of origin. 1353, we're at least getting the thought of using batteries from the shore.
Yeah. And does that then affect, transportation practices and so on and so forth? History's, if there's one thing about history, about our past, look, everything's connected, right? Yeah. So at some level you end up figuring out how, that butterfly flapped its wings, and here we go down the pike. Great question.
Yeah, great question. So I've got to follow up, and this is one I don't know. There's two platforms off down below Harlech Castle on the cliff that goes all the way to the shore on the base. They've always been said to be trebuchet platforms. I don't think they're wide enough to be trebuchet. Perhaps ballista. I don't know. They don't seem to have any other purpose. And so, if anybody out there knows what the platforms at Harlech were used for when they're pointed at the sea,
they can't be loading cranes.
Well, that's the other thing that I suspect,
because that's where the supplies are coming in.
They are coming in that way. It's pretty far up to be loading cranes, and yet it would appear that most supplies would be taken to Harlech by mules and not mules, donkeys and so forth, going up the side of the hill. But they're always said in all the guidebooks to be catapult platforms, and I just don't buy it. But that would be certainly an interesting one if they are purposely built artillery platforms, pre-gunpowder artillery platforms, to attack the sea or attack ships that might be coming into the harbor below the castle.
What I'm hearing is I need to take a trip to Harlech. That's what I'm hearing.
You've never been there, yeah? You've got to go with W.
I've been to Harlech, but
Savage. Oh, you have been to Harlech. Yeah.
I have been to Harlech, but I was there very specifically looking at the siege of Owen Glendower.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Both his taking of it and then it being retaken from him. So I didn't look at those platforms. So I got to go back, and it's on my to-do list now. Woe
And
is
I would
me,
say
because
you
I
got to
love
go with
whales.
Bob Wisdom Savage. A visit to Harlech with Bob Wisdom Savage could be an out of body experience, literally, because he seems to be going up and down the walls. I don't know.
Rock and roll. I'll start getting ready for it. I'll start working out. I'll get ready. So great. Yeah, look, great question. I think in the question you sort of apologized. Sorry, this isn't necessarily directly military. Like, no, man, bring it on. Love it.
Bring it on, yeah.
Love it. Another question. Um, Roof Mistress asks, I believe this is a Wheel of Time fan. What's up, my peeps? During one of your earlier podcasts, you mentioned that despite not going off to war, the wives often had to defend the keeps while the men were away fighting. Any examples of this that were noteworthy? Glad you asked.
Glad you asked. Glad you asked. And women in war. Okay, let's begin by saying we're not talking about a large number of women who are influencing military, the actual fighting of military campaigns and so forth. But we've
Okay, but
got,
let me just stop you right there,
yeah,
because what we're being asked is, well, not actually fighting in the campaign, right? Like this is
right,
like left at home
yeah,
having to fight, which is the kind of forgotten aspect of war, right?
yeah,
That is
absolutely. And one of the reasons why I pointed that out, because other than Joan of Arc, we really don't have anybody on the lines during the Middle Ages, but a large number that are left home. Um, the one that comes to mind, of course, is not one is only because we have her letter to her husband, and
mm,
that's Margaret Paston.
the
And
past
Margaret
and letters.
Paston letters, and Margaret's in charge of John says off to war. See you when I see you. That sort of thing. And poor Margaret's in charge of all and she writes these wonderful letters, giving us all sorts of information of what it's like to be, in a war. This is Wars of the Roses. That means your rather large mansion, castle, chateau, whatever you want to call it, is a target, and she's got to defend it if it is.
Yeah, and I said we have so many of these letters from her. The whole, I mean, it's actually letters from everybody in the family.
Yeah,
It's a trove. It's incredible. But yeah, not to diminish the other ones. Certainly, the most interesting letters, I think, for me, and it sounds like for you, are hers.
oh yes,
Where we're getting her perspective on things and how she is, grappling with this responsibility. How is she going to pay for what she needs to pay for? Like,
yeah,
I need these things. And she's very specific at times. Like, I need these kind of weapons. Like, and I need them this way because our house is built this way. And so those are the ones that I need. Right. And so
yeah,
how am I going to pay for them? And also we also need cloth, cause I'm making a dress for the daughter.
yeah,
It is amazing kind of like, overlap of worlds, right? That these are, it's one world to her, right? But
hmm
for us, it seems like totally different worlds. So yeah, that's gotta be number one on the
and
list, right?
she is one capable woman. I mean, I get the feeling that every once in a while you get the letter from John back to her, and he's saying, glad somebody's thinking about these things because I have no idea what to tell you about that. But she does talk about the place being attacked once and having to defend it, and that they do.
Uh,
And
yeah. So this is actually we have in our medieval reader. I translated a couple of these letters. This is item number 37. This is 1449. She was writing this. This is just the opening. This kills me every time. It's so incredible. Rightly honored husband. She mean John Paston. Rightly honored husband. I recommend myself to you. This is normal. This is a kind of normal opening. All right,
yeah,
everybody.
yeah.
If you're not familiar with medieval letters, this is often how they open. And pray that you will get some crossbows, windlasses to bind them, and quarrels. Our houses here are so low ceilinged that no man may shoot out with a longbow, though we need to be able to shoot out.
Just
Okay.
matter of fact. if you hadn't thought about this, John, let me just point out
Right.
the ceilings are too low.
The students too like, don't. We can't be playing with no longbows in here, son. And then, and she goes on, says, also need a couple, two or three short pole axes, and some jacks. That's a kind of armor, if you can. And then sort of goes on to talk about like this ongoing quarrel that's happening locally, and then says, also if you can buy for me 1 pound of almonds, 1 pound of sugar, and some frieze to make some children's gowns. You'll get the best prices and choices from the wife of Hay, so I'm told, and also a yard of broadcloth of black for a hood for me. There's no good cloth or frieze in this town. Like, oh my God, you
Yeah.
are the most amazing human being on the planet. I love Margaret
Yeah, it
Paston.
is.
It's
It
just
is fun
incredible.
that she starts out with crossbows and ends with almonds. Almonds
And
and
yeah, and also
sugar.
some almonds. Like while you're at the
Yeah,
store,
yeah. Well, you're at the local store. Won't you pick me up at the crossbow store? You'll find a section of almonds and sugar.
but but no bloody longbows. Don't you like? Don't even think about it,
No,
man.
yeah,
Our ceiling is too
shoot longbows. Oh, that is
the
no. She's amazing, and that's one of the reasons why we are so enthralled by Margaret Passy because she's so capable,
yeah
and obviously,
yeah
and takes us all in stride. Yeah. Oh, by the way, yeah, we're going to
yeah
get attacked. So and so when you're out shopping, pick up a few
yeah.
crossbows. No longbows,
Just
please. They're going to
just
have a special on
amazing.
longbows. Stay away from them. We
Yeah,
can't use
stay
them.
away from 'em. I don't care if they're on
Yeah.
sale. I don't care if they're on sale. We can't use them. And and she knows all the terminology, right? She knows
She knows all the
windlasses. I
terminology.
need
Yeah.
this. I know, like, she knows pole axes. She knows the stuff,
She has cannons
man.
someplace where she knows the different types of
And
cannons and so forth in her
that's right.
letters.
She does.
Yeah.
She
So
does.
it's a
And this, probably she is not honestly unusual.
no,
What is
no.
unusual is we have the letters,
Yeah.
right? That's the
Uh,
key.
Then we hear of, I mean, the Matilda of Tuscany, for example, in the 11th century, she's defending castles against Henry V and or Henry IV, and we've got others. I'm thinking Jean of Brittany in the early 14th century, and she has to defend castles, and we only hear about them doing it. We don't actually hear the specifics of the like Margaret gives us in these letters about how she's having to deal with this. She's got obviously very many different. She's multitasking there, by almonds, by sugar and stuff for the kids, and a hood for me. It's amazing. One of my favorite stories, we also included this in the reader, is about somebody we would not have heard of otherwise. We've got one little tiny bit of a Byzantine chronicle, and George Dennis found it, and he published it originally, and so we had to include it. And this is a woman on an island in the Mediterranean who defends the island with a bow, defends the island.
Yes. Yes. This is item 93 in the medieval warfare. It's become like an ad for the medieval warfare reader. Uh, Buy now, and you can read it. So yeah, item number 93, Archer Woman of Korea,
Korea.
1341. 1341, and yeah, George Dennis found this thing. Like, what a treat to find this. Absolutely insane. It's from this obscure manuscript in Florence. You want me to read this whole thing?
Yeah, well, read the bit that describes her.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's only like 3 sentences, the whole thing.
That's
In the part of Korea just opposite Chios, it is reported that in our own day, a mature woman with some facial hair, named Macarino, married and with children, displayed her valor and leadership when the occasion presented itself. What she did was no less than what a man would do, indeed, what the bravest men would do. For her ability to stretch tight and stiff bows was awesome. It is said that by herself she stood up to 2 pirate ships and drove them from the shore by shooting arrows at them in the year 1341.
it is it is
Hell
great.
yes.
Again, one of these things that we have no idea who wrote this. It is an
No
obscure
idea.
Florentine manuscript. And but just describing, of course, having to describe her as in masculine terms, but just a mature woman, meaning
Yeah.
not a beauty, not a youth, not a beauty because she has a little facial hair.
I I like,
And
in my head canon, she is like Gal Gadot beautiful. I adore this woman. She is a machine. Um, but yeah, I mean, yeah, the whole the strange oddity of having accounts like this, right? That we have the passing letters, that we have, and if I recall, it's just like a scrap of manuscript that was stuck in another manuscript, and George was like, "What's this?"
yeah,
Like, how many stories like that were there that were lost? It has to be just this mind-boggling number,
yeah,
right? And it's so sad because they're amazing stories,
yeah.
and yeah, they're otherwise kind of hidden, which is unfortunate.
It is unfortunate. It does, though, give us I think, a larger way to look at women in warfare is, we it used to be, oh well, you look at Joan of Arc and then you have to jump to washerwomen. The washwomen and prostitutes that are tending the soldiers as going along battle, and we shouldn't forget them. They are very important, and I think the little passage in that Guillaume Guillard writes about camping on campaign. It's also in the Reader, where he talks about women not as prostitutes but as cooks and saloon. All of a sudden they stop and everybody starts digging ovens into the hillside to cook bread, and they bring out the beer and bring out the cards, and they're women who are servicing the men by filling their bellies, by taking their money and drink and bringing more beer and so forth. We can't forget those either. But having these little stories, this woman of Korea who was able to just to take two pirate ships on, the bravery is extraordinary. Nobody's getting my children.
Yeah, I just picture, like, Jimmy, sit down, hand me arrows. Like, oh, okay, mom. Yeah,
Yeah,
really cool stuff. Yeah, great question.
great question. One of my the passages I just taught my students, and well, in fact, they picked it up, is in the Viking Reader that University of Toronto puts out, but it's about it's about the Shield Maiden who marries
Mm-hmm.
who marries oh geez, now he slipped my mind, the guy on the Viking shows,
Ragnar Lothbrok.
Ragnar Lothbrok, and it
Ragnar
talks about her.
Lothbrok.
Yeah, Lothbrok. It talks about how good she is as a fighter, and this is what attracts him to her. Although he then throws her aside after she's had a couple of kids and marries a princess from somewhere else. Like Ragnar is not as
Ragnar is such a Sigurd sometimes.
such. Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah. He absolutely
Such a
is.
Sigurd.
But he is impressed by the fighting capability of this shield maiden, who happens to be the daughter also of an important chieftain, and so he marries her. And uh, my student said, "Well, how many of these are there?" Well, probably not a
How
whole
many shield
large
maidens?
number. Shield maidens, yeah, but we
Yeah.
do have some burials that they've now encountered that show
Um,
weapons and female skeletons. So there are some, um, perhaps not as important as the one that marries Ragnar, but out there.
yeah, shield maidens. I would say there are as many as I'm not about to tell one of them that they're not a shield maiden.
Right. There'd be far more of them if you started asking. There'd be far fewer of you.
Yeah, they're far fewer of me. Yeah, yeah. It's. I mean, it's a great question to wonder how many there were, at any given moment, um, and and for that matter, kind of what constituted that qualification, right? What is. It's not like there's a certifying board, so what constitutes becoming a shield maiden within, like, on the ground culture. I don't think we really know. It's probably not really
Yeah,
recoverable at this point.
it isn't. I mean, we're dealing with very few archaeological exemplar, and then sagas essentially after that. Not much there. And and again, they're pointing out someone who is more of an offensive fighter and so forth, Joan of Arc type. Well, but I think most of them are pressed into duty. It's like Margaret Paston, or Matilda or Jean, and that's just that they've got defense with when the army is away. Defense has got to be taken on by the next level, and those would be the widows and women left behind.
Yeah, yeah, and that's going to be the case, right? I mean, at any point, you see in World War II, right? Rosie the Riveter, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
necessity of, I mean, it's not a literal defense of the country, but it's enabling things to move forward and progress militarily and economically by stepping into those roles. So yeah, it happened then too. It
Yeah.
absolutely did. We just, again, usually don't have the evidence of it except in these few moments.
And we don't want to ignore the evidence when it is there. So,
Yeah,
for
we've got to
example,
like
the siege of
focus
the
on it for
roads.
sure.
Yeah, the siege of roads. Women do appear throughout, and they're often bringing food, water, ammunition to the soldiers on the walls. That is their purpose. And that is so useful because then it can be delivered. The soldiers can stay on the walls and not have to get these items themselves. So there's probably even more that we don't have mention of, or very slight mention, that we should
Oh yeah,
build on more.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Um,
There'll be more
so
and more
let's
questions. Women in warfare is still a topic that needs lots of work.
yeah, bring it on. Uh, I got one more. Let's do one more.
Okay.
Andrew Yarish. Yarash? I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your name. Something like that. Andrew, buddy. Says Castion was a terrific podcast in what is a series of always fascinating conversations. And thank you for your kind words, Andrew.
Absolutely, yeah.
He says, as I was sharing your bafflement at Talbot's behavior, I wondered if his lifetime as a soldier, with hits to the head inside a helmet, jousting collisions, etc., left him with a case of CTE. That is, did he effectively have brain damage, like
Yeah.
at this point, as we see now in American football, guys having these problems later in life because of the blows that they've had to the head. Great question.
It is a great question. And, I'm thinking first of the CTE, and then we'll come back to Talbot on this because you remember the tournament that we also we're going back to the reader, but Froissart description of the tournament outside of Calais
Yes,
during the
yes,
time of peace.
yes.
And there are only two spots where they can gain points in the joust, and one is the targ that is attached to their shoulder on the left arm, and then the other one is the helmet. And how many different
Is the
accounts
head
he has of the helmets getting absolutely pounded by these blows with lance to the some of them even breaking the leather strap underneath the head. And I can't help but start thinking about concussion protocols at that point. I mean, how are these knights surviving that much to their head?
put me in, coach. I'm fine. I'm
Yeah,
fine. Put me in.
yeah. How many
Um,
figures do I have? That sort of thing.
yeah, it's item 30 in the medieval raider. Peacetime jousts at Saint Engelver in
Same name, yeah.
1390. And yeah, it is absolutely brutal. And talking about these hits, like, and yeah, there's padding, yeah, but
Not that
they're
much.
brutal. I mean, I played football, and there was it was a
Me
nice
too.
helmet, and
Yeah,
there was lots of padding in there, and but if you took a solid smack head on head. I was like a tight end, and so sometimes you catch a pass across the middle, laying out, and like there's a middle linebacker coming the other direction. I'm pretty sure like that's gonna and head on head. People are probably listening like that explains a lot about Mike right now. It I mean, the idea of ringing your bell, yeah, it does, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you do that enough, it's gonna have an effect. Did he have CTE? Oh, God, I wish I knew.
Well, and we don't have, I mean, we can assume that Talbot was in tournaments. There are certain tournaments. I mean, the ones that participated at St. Engelbert are three French knights, not at the
Yeah,
level of Talbot. I mean, they're up there. And then they're challenged by younger men from England. And there's at least one from the Low Countries. And then there's one German who does
the
something
German.
wrong, and everybody stops the tournament, goes over and chides me, has to apologize, and isn't allowed to continue anymore. And Poissart clearly doesn't know what he's done, but
Yeah,
it's clearly
yeah.
not hit the guy in the head because that would have been legal, a legal blow. But there, so Talbot probably did that. He's captured. Talbot is captured at Pate um, in 1429 and by Joan of Arc's forces. Joan will get there at the end of the battle. He's one of the two that gets captured there. We don't know about a lot of other uh, activity, and we don't think at that point that he was wounded or been hit on the head or anything. So, you'd have to track down to see how many blows he actually had taken the head and other things like this, plus his age, his advanced age at that time, plus the fact that he has this real bananas idea of chivalry shoved into this with the promise of not wearing armor. And, the point that 100 Years' War historians are probably half and half on whether this is true or not. I tend to believe that it is. But is that the result of CTE? Is that just simply the result of a misapplication of chivalry, uh, or is it that he's old age, his dementia setting in for whatever reason? Uh,
Well, he's not that old. I mean, this is like King John of Bohemia, and you're like, everybody's like, oh, old King John of Bohemia. He's not that old, right?
no, he's in his 40s, isn't he?
Um, Bohemia, I think he's 50, in
Yeah,
his
something like
50s.
that. Yeah,
Um,
and Talbot is
so
at
yeah,
most 60-ish.
so yeah, there's a level of yeah. What else could be going on? Is CTE possible? I mean, the answer to that is yes.
Yes.
Right. Without doubt, it's possible. Can we know? I don't think we can, unless somebody medical out there is like, you actually can examine the bones of the skull and you can see changes that have taken place, and those are tied to CT. I don't know that we have that. I think CT is only detectable in soft tissue, which we don't have in certainly Talbot's case.
No.
We have the skull because a mouse was living in it. Um,
And it didn't
Definitely
have
part of this
it
problem.
didn't have a dent on it like some of the skulls that are excavated, where we know a blunt-edged weapon has been used or something that damaged
Oh yeah,
the
yeah.
skull or
Well,
the
of course
brain.
we got some of these skulls where there's it's been broken but healed partially,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And you
yeah,
think, my God, like,
yeah, yeah. One I can think of at least two examples of that where there have been healing. 6 months in the case of one, at least 6 months in the case of one, where he lived with and the brain membrane would have been broken in that case too. So you wonder about brain damage and the effect of it. We wonder about brain damage on possible brain damage. Henry V taking that arrow into that may have nicked the bottom of his brain.
yeah. Well, it would have. I mean, if I'm right about where the arrow goes through, which people are free to argue with me on that, it would have glanced off the bottom of his brain pan. You could have had bruising on the other side. But yeah, this is I mean, Andrew, your question is a terrific question. This kind of medical diagnosis of history is to some degree kind of impossible, but is also like something you can't sort of take off the board either,
No,
right? You
that's
know that
exactly
this
right.
kind of thing happened, right? It's like it's like PTSD, trauma from battle. Like we know it had to happen. Like it happened. So, but we can't necessarily diagnose it and say, well that guy's got it, and that's why we're seeing X. We can't. It's really hard to do that. But you also know that it's quite possible that that's what's going on.
And you could read about a little bit. I think that you can, if you're looking at Jean de Joinville's account of St. Louis, that there's times that Joinville is very much in the fight, where he seems to be traumatized, and I think that there are other accounts that can seem that way too. And yet, then there's Piernino, who now we don't in the one big battle that he has, where at one point he's got a crossbow bolt out of his sinus, and the guy's hitting on it with a shield, and and Piernino doesn't get hurt; he gets angry. So there's got to be some
Every
who
time,
probably didn't get affected at all. I mean, Piernino,
well, or he was that affected.
or
He
he
might
was
have
that
been that
affected.
affected that he
Yeah,
wasn't affected. You know what I mean?
yeah, I know
But
exactly.
I started laughing because every time I read that with my students, there's this there was this great Netflix documentary. There was The Last Dance about the Chicago Bulls, and Michael Jordan. It's like a recurring thing, right? That Jordan is so good, but his heart kind of wasn't necessarily into something, and so he's like, yeah, playing along. But then somebody said something to him, and it looks at the camera, goes, and I took that personally. And then it's like, then he scored 50 points, right?
Yeah,
And every
yeah.
time I think of Dom Perignon, we're getting this crossbow bolt can hit. It's just like, and then I took that personally. And then he like slaughters all these people.
Yeah, he
What?
gets upset. Yeah, that kind of angered me. Getting shot in the face
So
with a
I was
crossbow
angry.
bolt. Yeah, I was angry. And this guy
What?
hitting it with a shield, I mean, why would he do
Yeah.
that?
Why would he do that, man?
Yeah.
Like, I was just minding my own business with a crossbow bolt in me, just fighting. But that was beyond the pale, sir.
Yeah, that was it. I mean, he does
Uh,
kill that guy who's pounding him on with, so I guess he
yeah,
made his
yeah, he
point.
does.
But
He's,
yeah,
well,
so
he took that personally.
I, I think when we look at some of these and we hear about some of the wounds that are being taken, and yet they're fighting through or something along those lines. We should record them. We should say, okay, what is the possibility here? Why is there, is this an adrenaline rush? Is this just that, Pernino has got some sort of complex that allows him to live through pain like this? I mean, he later on, um, rather than lose a leg, if you remember, he takes a cautery and cauterizes his own leg. That's take two. Halfway through, they hand him a second one.
Yeah.
And you'd think, how is he not passed out on this?
Because the doctor was afraid to do it. That's
The
just
surgeons, yeah, they're afraid.
amazing.
He's on a
Yeah.
boat on top of it all. He's on a ship. He's doing this. And you think, yeah,
Give
he's
me that.
probably humming a little ditty while he's doing it. Oh, here's a fresh cautery. Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's another hot one. Please don't take this personally.
Yeah,
Um, well, great. I mean, look, great questions, everybody.
yeah,
Terrific questions,
absolutely.
as ever, because y'all are the best. Really great questions. So look, they're closing us up here.
Hmm.
Please,
We've drunk all the gin.
please do join us next time. Please do join us next time when we'll be talking about Mongols with our special guest Nick Morton.
Yeah,
Should be a great conversation.
great conversation. Mongols in the Middle East, and Nick,
Yeah,
who's not a Mongol, um, one of the nicest gentlemen ever writing about Mongols.
yeah, like I mean that we know of. Maybe secretly
Maybe.
Nick's no,
Yeah,
yeah,
I know.
Nick's an awesome dude. So yeah, we're gonna have a great conversation there. As ever, a reminder: this podcast is sponsored by medievalists.net. So the best way to support us, other than buying our individual books, of course, is to join their Patreon at patreon.com/medievalists. And that's also the absolute best place to drop us a line if you have a question for our next Q&A. So, thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.